In the previous section, we analyzed how counteroffers and verbal agreements determine whether a real estate contract is legally enforceable under Arizona law. Building on that foundation, we now turn to an equally important concept in property law: the bona fide purchaser, often referred to as a BFP. This principle plays a key role in protecting innocent buyers who acquire property in good faith, without knowledge of competing claims or defects in title. Understanding who qualifies as a bona fide purchaser is essential for real estate professionals, as it determines who ultimately holds superior ownership rights in a dispute and reinforces the need for proper due diligence, recordation, and disclosure. A bona fide purchaser is defined as someone who buys real property for valuable consideration, in good faith, and without notice, actual or constructive, of any other person's claim to the property. In Arizona, this concept is rooted in ARS Paragraph 33-411 and supported by long-standing case law that establishes that title to property passes to a bona fide purchaser free of prior unrecorded interests or defects that the purchaser did not and could not reasonably know about. This doctrine is fundamental to ensuring certainty in property ownership and protecting those who rely on public records and good faith transactions. The first characteristic of a bona fide purchaser is the giving of valuable consideration. This means the buyer must have paid something of value for the property, typically money, services, or another asset. A gift transfer or inheritance does not create a bona fide purchaser because the recipient did not provide consideration. For example, if a family member receives property as a gift, they are not a bona fide purchaser and could lose title if a prior, undisclosed claim surfaces. In contrast, a buyer who pays full market value for a property after performing due diligence would be protected as a bona fide purchaser under Arizona law. The second defining feature is good faith. Good faith means honesty in intention and the absence of fraud or collusion. A buyer acting in good faith conducts the transaction fairly, without any intent to deceive or take advantage of another's mistake. For instance, a buyer who knowingly takes title to a property at a suspiciously low price from a seller in financial distress, without verifying ownership, cannot later claim bona fide purchaser status. Courts have consistently held that a purchaser who ignores red flags or deliberately avoids investigating title cannot claim protection as a good faith buyer. The third and most significant characteristic is lack of notice. Arizona law distinguishes between three forms of notice: actual, constructive, and inquiry notice. Actual notice occurs when the buyer has direct knowledge of another's claim. For example, being informed of an unrecorded lien or pending lawsuit. Constructive notice arises when an instrument, such as a deed or lien, is properly recorded with the county recorder's office. Once recorded, all subsequent buyers are deemed to have constructive notice of that instrument, even if they did not personally review it. Inquiry notice occurs when circumstances would cause a reasonable person to investigate further. For example, if a buyer visits a property and finds someone other than the seller occupying it, the buyer has a duty to inquire about that person's rights. Failure to do so negates bona fide purchaser protection. To illustrate, consider a scenario where buyer A purchases property from seller, unaware that seller previously sold the same property to buyer B, who failed to record their deed. When buyer A records their deed first, they become the lawful owner because they were a bona fide purchaser, having paid value, acted in good faith, and lacked notice of buyer B's prior claim. This rule protects the integrity of the recording system by prioritizing those who rely on public records in good faith. In another scenario, if a buyer learns that a mechanic's lien has been filed but proceeds with the purchase without addressing it, they no longer qualify as a bona fide purchaser because they had actual notice of a defect in title. This distinction reinforces why title searches, title insurance, and escrow procedures are vital components of Arizona real estate transactions. These mechanisms ensure that buyers are aware of existing encumbrances before closing, allowing them to make informed decisions and preserve their rights under the bona fide purchaser doctrine. The bona fide purchaser doctrine was strongly affirmed in Davis versus Kleindienst, 1933, where the Arizona Supreme Court ruled that a purchaser who acquires property in good faith for valuable consideration and without notice of prior claims takes title free of those claims. Similarly, Hall versus World Savings and Loan Association, 2000, reaffirmed that bona fide purchasers are protected against unrecorded interests, but only when they act diligently and record promptly. These cases emphasize that the recording system and the duty of good faith work hand in hand to protect both property owners and the public record. Arizona's recording statutes under ARS, paragraph 33, 411A, also reinforce this doctrine by providing that no instrument affecting real property shall be valid against subsequent purchasers for valuable consideration without notice unless it is recorded. This means that a buyer who records first, without notice of another unrecorded interest, has priority. The Commissioner's rules also require that brokers exercise reasonable care and diligence, R428-1101, to help their clients understand title conditions and the importance of recording promptly. Failure to advise clients appropriately could expose brokers to liability if their clients lose title priority. Discussion. Why is a bona fide purchaser protected under Arizona law? Answer. Because they acquire property in good faith, for valuable consideration, and without notice of prior claims, thus ensuring fairness and reliability in real estate transactions. How does recording a deed protect a buyer's ownership rights? Answer. Recording provides constructive notice to the public, preventing later buyers from claiming ignorance of the existing ownership and preserving title priority. Why might a buyer lose their status as a bona fide purchaser? Answer. If they have actual, constructive, or inquiry notice of another party's claim, or if they fail to act in good faith by ignoring information that suggests a title defect. Review summary. A bona fide purchaser in Arizona is a buyer who acquires property honestly, pays valuable consideration, and lacks notice, actual, constructive, or inquiry of any competing claim to the property. This protection is rooted in the statute of frauds and reinforced by the state's recording laws, which promote clarity and public confidence in land ownership. Recording deeds and conducting proper due diligence are critical to maintaining bona fide purchaser status. Real estate professionals play a vital role in ensuring that their clients understand title conditions, investigate potential encumbrances, and record promptly to secure their interests. Through the principles established in Davis versus Kleindienst and Hall versus World Savings and Loan Association, Arizona courts have made it clear that good faith and transparency are the cornerstones of lawful property acquisition.